Good morning, this is Kent McBride from Goodonomics Radio, and today we are having a conversation with Mickki Langston, who is the Executive Director of the Mile High Business Alliance, and we are going to be talking about the Mile High Business Alliance and focusing on local. Now, some people might wonder what the heck local has to do with Goodonomics, and as Tiff O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, once said, all politics is local. I think that food production and commerce should be much more localized. Mickki's an expert, I'm not, so I'm going to ask Mickki to tell us about the Mile High Business Alliance, and then I'm going to kind of let her do a stream of consciousness roll here until I jump in with some questions. So Mickki, welcome to Goodonomics Radio, and tell us about the Mile High Business Alliance.
Yeah, thanks. So the Mile High Business Alliance was created in 2007 because we are interested in having a resilient and connected and healthy local economy. And so the question is, how do we build that economy? How do we have an economy that truly provides for the needs of people, which is the fundamental purpose of the economy, and while doing so, doesn't sacrifice the other things that we value? So the Business Alliance was started to really bring together local businesses around this common purpose. And we work specifically with locally owned businesses because they are inherently more connected to the needs of our community. The owners of those businesses live here, so they know what it means to be a citizen of Colorado, and their kids go to schools in their neighborhoods, and they see more of the consequences of the decisions that we make as a community. So we choose to work with local businesses because of that inherent relationship. And if we're looking for how do we do business better? How do we have businesses that are providing goods and services, but they're doing so in ways that are more responsible? For us, shortening the supply chain, so to speak, in a lot of ways, both from the distance that our goods are traveling or the distance between the people who are running these businesses and making those decisions and the impact of those decisions. The shorter those distances, the more we can see. And it's important for us to see the impact of how we're doing things. So in any case, we started the Business Alliance with that intention of helping to build and strengthen our local economy. So we work with several hundred local businesses. For us, a business is local if they are based here in Colorado and not owned by a non-Colorado company. So it includes businesses of all sizes and shapes because they exist in all sizes and shapes. But we want to focus primarily on those businesses based here. And we provide a lot of different programs and services for our business members that help them build relationships within the community, with neighbors, people that are looking for what they provide, as well as with other businesses. So we strengthen business relationships within the network. We provide and produce several Local First campaigns. So Colorado Local First, Eat Local First, Buy Local Week. We're working this year for the first time on Small Business Week. So all of those campaigns are an opportunity for us to educate the community about the differences between local business and non-local business, and for people to strengthen those relationships, to realize, these are the businesses in my community that are based here, that are owned by my neighbors, and when I spend money at those businesses, it has a different impact than if I were to spend money at a different business. I'm
glad you said that because I'm a business guy. I'm a for-profit whose goal is to be triple bottom line and to do good in the community. You're a non-profit. Yeah. The other night we were at the screening of the Economics of Happiness, and you spoke quite eloquently about local, and you said some numbers that were pretty staggering that I would suspect most people don't know about the impact of local dollars on the local economy. Can you share that with us?
Sure. So what we've come to understand is that when we spend $1 at a locally owned business, that dollar will recirculate at least 3 times more in our local community before leaving.
What does that mean, recirculate?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. One of the indicators of economic health, something that we already measure in economics, is the velocity of money. So it's the number of times that money is spent with another person. So a business earns $1 because someone buys something from them. That business then spends money on their own goods and services for their business. They pay their employees with it. They pay local taxes. They, pay their own salaries as well as retain any profits that are earned by their business. That recirculation of those dollars, so just to take it even further, the employee then spends money on the things that they need. They pay their local taxes. They, put that money back into another local business who is starting that cycle over again. So this is something that happens with businesses inside of our economy all the time. And one thing that we can measure is that velocity. How quickly is money moving? How many times is it changing hands? And what that does, that exchange of dollars enables businesses and people to get what they need. Because that's the tool. We use money as a tool for moving resources around, right? Getting those things that we need, whether it's food or clothing or other experiences that make us happy. Our governments depend upon the collection of revenue from businesses and individuals to be able to provide their services. So one way of increasing the capacity of a business or of a community is increasing the capacity of businesses to be able to keep moving that money around. That's one of the functions of commerce, right? It's why it's such an important tool for a community, is if this business has the revenue because they provided value to be able to pay their employees, then we have a more stable economy. If they can have enough revenue to pay their bills to another business, then that business can pay their employees, and we have a more stable economy. So it's those interrelationships of businesses providing goods and services and the people who interact with them that makes for that builds those capacities as a community. So as businesses lose that capacity, right, as businesses lose revenue, as they lose the capacity to capitalize their business, then that means they can't spend as much money. So they have to start laying off their employees. They stop paying their bills to other businesses, and that downward cycle, that downward spiral, is a cycle that is something we're suffering from right now. It's why a recession is such a bad thing, is because we then lose the capacity of these businesses to be able to function.
But the local versus the national, keeping those dollars in the community. So you said the dollars recirculate 3 times faster.
3 times as more, right?
3 times as more. So
no, I'm sorry. It's 3 times more. It's not 3 times.
Okay,
faster.
3 times more. Okay, so I spend $1 at the store, and then they can either spend that with a out-of-state company or an out-of-country company.
Exactly.
And that has a different impact on the economy than if I buy a product as a business owner from a locally owned company.
Exactly.
More of that dollar, you're saying more of those dollars stay here in some significant number.
Yes.
Because the taxes are being paid here, they're hiring local employees here as opposed to a company where that revenue goes somewhere else.
Exactly. So there's a few different studies that have been done to figure out how does this work? Is there really a quantifiable, measurable difference between a local company and a non-local company? And there's 2 in particular that have really helped us to understand those dynamics. One study was done in Austin, Texas, looking at the impact of a locally owned bookstore versus a chain bookstore. And they basically looked at where those businesses spend their revenue and what those differences were. And they found a couple of primary differences between the local and non-local companies. One of the first being that the local business actually advertised locally. So they promoted their business through other local organizations and media companies versus the national chain, which didn't purchase any local marketing. Another difference was their financial and accounting services. So the locally owned bookstore hired local accountants and lawyers to be able to provide those professional services. The national chain had all of those services concentrated at their headquarters, which were not local.
Which is their local, for them.
Right, for them,
right, yeah.
But for this local bookstore, they were putting more money back into the economy that way. The other way is for the bookstore, they actually gave to local charities, and I may be confusing the studies, but that difference with the local business being more connected with local philanthropic activity sustained and supported the local economy differently than how the local bookstore did. So they were able to find these quantifiable differences between the local businesses and the non-local businesses. And actually, there's one more. I think I am overlapping the studies. But the other difference was the local bookstore had high-level managers that made a higher salary, and the chain bookstore didn't have any of that high-level staff, right? They just have their mid-level managers. So that meant that the wages that the business was able to put back into the community were more significant than with the chain. And there was a second study that I'm confusing that was actually about office supplies and purchased by the state. So it was looking at the impact of state procurement dollars. So if a state is to contract, for office supplies from a chain versus a locally owned office supply retailer, what's the difference in terms of the community's capacity to retain that money? And in that study, what they found is that if the state of Arizona spent $5 million in 1 year at a chain retailer like an Office Max or an Office Depot, they were looking specifically at one of them, that at the end of the year, about $580,000 would remain in the community. If they were to spend that same $5 million with Staples, which is another chain, even less of that money actually stayed in the community. But if they were to spend it at a locally owned office supply retailer, that $1 million more would stay in the community at the end of the year. So the impact was almost twice as much by the local company versus a non-local company. And those kinds of quantifiable metrics are really interesting because they help us understand the way that a business operates does have a long-term impact in the community. And we have this myth. There's a lot of myths of business that we want to dispel, but one of them is that every business is created equally. All businesses are the same, that when we spend $1 or $3 buying a latte at a chain coffee shop, that $3 has the same impact on our community as if we were to spend it in a locally owned coffee shop. And what we're really trying to communicate and share with the community is that that just isn't the case. They have a measurable, quantifiable difference. And there are real reasons why that happens, whether it's because of where that business is spending its money getting its own goods and services, or the number of people that are employed and how much they're paid, the local taxes that are paid by those businesses, or where those businesses are then investing their profits. So all of those components are different for different businesses and different industries, but they still make a difference in building up our capacity.
So this is not a topic that's talked about a lot from my hearing, if you will. And sometimes when people talk about it, there's some people who are not, let's say, pro-local. They might go, it sounds protectionist. It sounds anti-big business.
Yeah.
And so, I understand how that might happen, but there's a lot of things to look at, including transportation, particularly stuff that's produced locally. And how does that fit into the equation? Transportation costs, et cetera, food, local growers, et cetera.
Well, one thing that we are dealing with right now is that anytime there's instability with oil production in the Middle East, we see significant increases in the cost of gasoline. And I think it's something like for every $100, no, not every $100, every $10 that a barrel of oil increases, the price of gas increases 10 cents. I'm saying this from remembering off of hearing it on the radio, so we might have to double check that. But there is a very strong correlation between the instability of the oil market, which actually has less to do with demand and production, which is what supply demand is what we think of in terms of price. But it actually has a lot more to do with politics and with oil futures. So we have a lot of gambling that's happening in the marketplace for oil that's directly impacting the cost for individuals and businesses in using that resource. So that's one great example of how do we create more stability for businesses and individuals to be able to operate. If you're a business who relies heavily on transportation, of importing your product or exporting your product, and now you're dealing with wildly fluctuating energy costs for moving that product, that seriously undermines your capacity to predict what your business is going to need in terms of revenue.